crypto OG, which countries do you think are the most interesting for crypto investors?
I mean, Caribbean is obviously quite established, right? Like I remember Roger Ver was the first like crypto OG to get a St. Kitts passport, and I think like they're still pretty well established. Obviously, St. Kitts leading the pack in terms of like being established. And then for families, you have Antigua and Barbuda. That it's really a wonderful program. Then you have like some European ones that are quite more pricey. We can see what happens with the EU. Things are quite uncertain. For sure, I mean, even whatever happens with the EU, you always have this thing that, again, like kind of like reality was first and then expectations are created later. So like even though the EU might have a lot of problems, I think the passports still are going to keep a lot of their power over the course of at least the next decade. But yeah, I would say like the Caribbean ones are probably still the best bet.
That's really interesting when it comes to especially citizenship, to basically crypto investors that want to just have a second option, a backup plan. When it comes to living, I think that many people still struggle to see themselves living in the Caribbean. What places are you looking at personally, or you see friends that are looking at those places? Maybe we talked about El Salvador or other places that in terms of lifestyle and basically day-to-day life makes sense for crypto people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we think about this all day at CitizenX, and like for the viewers here, we have like obviously when we have lunch or dinner together or whatever, like basically macro talk is one of the only things that we talk about. I think at some point the people around us are gonna get fed up of that and just tell us to shut up. But we think about this a lot, and we have so many conversations about Latin America and how things are changing there, right? I think we're at this very weird stage where in the fourth generational cycle, where we are almost like, I would say, reaching bottom in the West. Not rock bottom, because rock bottom is like usually where democracies tend to go towards fascism, communism, and that is rock bottom. And then after rock bottom, the people realize that there are changes that are needed, and there are usually revolts and stuff like that. You don't want to live in a country that is reaching rock bottom, essentially. At the same time, the countries that are like emergent are still quite emergent, and the quality of life might not be what you want, especially to like raise a family and stuff like that. And so El Salvador, for example, El Salvador is probably a great bet as long as Bukele is alive, right? But there is some uncertainty around that. And Latin America in general, it's quite unsafe in some places. If you go to, for example, Argentina, the trajectory is quite great. And like 10 years from now, might be an amazing place to live. But right now it's still quite unsafe, and you have a lot of issues, and also very isolated from anywhere else in the world. So if you have roots in the US, if you have roots in Europe, it's quite far away. Then obviously you have the Emirates. The Emirates, I think it's already quite established and has great quality of life if you like hopping into a car and going from point A to point B, and you can tolerate the extreme heat and constant sauna effect. And then Singapore is probably the place that is like most established right now, together with Switzerland, and where I think people get the best quality of life from what I've heard from people living there. And I think Switzerland is obviously the most established. What will happen with the EU is worrying for Switzerland as well. And I think two things can happen for Switzerland. One of them is either people stop moving to Switzerland because they realize that the EU and what's around them is getting worse and worse every year, or the contrary happens and people who value their European roots actually move to Switzerland to be close to their family, friends, whatnot, and then Switzerland even captures like more talented people into it, and basically you have a brain drain from everywhere in the EU into Switzerland. The UK is an interesting one because it had a very long tradition of rule of law and personal freedoms, and I think that's because that's why London attracted so many talented individuals. Now that's reversing quite quickly in the UK. So I think, unfortunately, the UK is not going to be a livable place for talented people.
That's very interesting because, the UK has gone down a lot, but still the common law is extremely valuable, and that's what has allowed places like the UAE to prosper. Also, what's really interesting is that if you look at the countries that have direct citizenship programs, where you can basically just invest or donate to the country and get citizenship in exchange, they are mostly common law countries that have gained full sovereignty, places like Malta, or in the Caribbean, like St. Kitts, Dominica, places that are Commonwealth, that had common law, and that allowed them to basically offer direct citizenship. Whereas, for example, in Europe, you have these programs like golden visas, where you are required to basically live in the country.